Hello, everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well, and to all our listeners.
Was it a good holiday season for you?
Oh, it was great. I loved it. Oh, it was kind of interesting because Fargo had 2.75 inches, almost 3 inches of rain that came down, soaked in, and so it did not seem like the end of December.
No, it was quite an odd thing.
A unique year.
Yeah, what do you think that any thoughts on what that rain might mean for, does it affect growing? Will it affect our gardens in any way? Will it make...
To be honest, I'm a little nervous because in wet, heavy soil, we can get rotting of things like perennials. And so I'm a little nervous, plus the lack of snow. I mean, I've enjoyed the lack of snow, but the perennials really need some protection before we start getting real cold temperatures.
You call it a blanket, kind of, right?
An insulating blanket of snow. And so I'm a little bit nervous, especially for those of us that have heavy clay soil, perennials setting in that wet, cool, or cold, clammy, damp soil. Rotting can set in. But there's not a whole lot we can do about that. So we roll with it.
Yeah. Well, that's, the end of the year. One of the things that comes up is a lot of lists. Did you see any lists gardening related? Maybe for a future show we could talk about some
there's some interesting trends for the new year. Yeah. That's always interesting. The gardening trends for the new year. And so we'll talk about those for another podcast.
Yeah, that would be a fun one.
Do you make any gardening resolutions?
Be better.
Yes.
I've
That's always a good one.
Yeah, there's things I want to try. There's things as far as like resolutions, no, not yet, but there's a lot of ideas that I have for things to do. I like looking at book and movie year in reviews.
Oh, yeah.
And did you see there was one about this? There was a book about a farmer who didn't finish seeding his field.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, well, apparently it was full of plot holes. little joke
that was
there.
Good. You worked that in just
I did.
Perfectly,
I tried
John.
that.
Yeah, that was great.
Because we're talking about seeding, right? We're going to talk about seeding on this show, not necessarily seeding so much, but the seed catalogs are out, and we've talked about this before, but
this is a favorite time of year for me.
It is. And so let's use some analogies. So I think an analogy you'd used before was like, this is kind of like a new Christmas all over again. Getting the catalogs in when you were a kid to look and see like what you wanted to order or what you wanted Santa to bring you as a kid.
This makes January fun. Yeah. Because really, when you open these seed catalogs, or even if you do it online, I still like thumbing through a seed catalog while I'm having a cup of coffee. But it takes you to a whole new world. All of a sudden, January doesn't seem so bleak. You're already thinking spring when you see all these, and it's awesome. That's one of the things I like. So to me, it's not just a practical thing. Okay, I get my seed catalog. What do we want? Let's make a list. But no, it's like, wow, this brings spring already. And so I get excited. There are new things. And so it's fun to talk about seed catalog.
Yeah, it's kind of not necessarily it's not just like making a grocery list, but rather looking at if you're into baking or if you're into cooking, it's like looking at a new cookbook where all these ideas seem possible. And then from that, you'll pull out the things that you need. So you get to look at all these catalogs. You get to see like, I really like that. That's something that I think I could do.
Yeah, that's a good point. It really helps you plan this coming growing season, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It gives you ideas of things to do, new things to try. And so it really does. In many ways, it kind of kicks off the thought process for making a better garden.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what comes first, the planning or then the planning or the ordering of the,
good
or do they kind of
question.
go so hand in hand?
Yeah. I think I look at a seed catalog or an online site for probably the inspiration and then set the plan after that. Yeah, so I don't think I probably have a preconceived plan and then go looking for it. I kind of let the seed catalogs talk to me. How's that?
That makes sense. That makes sense. So, I mean, are all seed catalogs the same? I mean, what are the differences in because you in front of us, I would say roughly looking, maybe you've got eight,
eight or 10. Yeah. And so there's a reason why I brought in 8 or 10, and this is just a small sampling of
this is your personal.
My personal collection.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why 8 or 10 here is because each of the seed companies seems to have a strong points to it. For example, Twilly seed. That's maybe not a household name like the Burpee seed or the Gurney's seed, but Twilly seed is a seed company that I've ordered from for probably 40 years. They specialize in vegetable seed. So that's where I can find the watermelon seed that I want to grow, because I think they probably list, if we open the page to watermelons, I think there's probably 50 different watermelon varieties, and sweet corns, lots of different ones. And so for vegetables, I go to that. They're a little weaker in the flower section. So for flowers, I maybe go to Burpees or one of those. It's a little stronger in those. And tomatoes. Oh, we all love tomatoes.
Oh, yeah.
There's a seed catalog called Totally Tomatoes. And boy, just take a look at that. The whole seed catalog
That's a lot of red on the color there.
Full of tomatoes. I bet there's, I don't know.
Juicy, ripe red tomatoes
I think they advertise that they've got 1,000 some varieties of tomatoes in there. So, I mean, if you can't find your tomato in there, you probably don't need it.
Yeah, you're not going to.
And also, peppers, tomatoes are they are in that same family type thing. And they also have a wide selection of peppers. So for tomatoes, I go to that. If I'm looking kind of maybe for, an older variety that would be fun to try, Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds is a fun catalog. Lots of gardeners like that one.
So talk a little bit about like what an heirloom seed is.
Yeah, a good question, because in most of these seed catalogs, they'll have a section that they'll call heirlooms, or they'll call a variety an heirloom variety. So generally the heirlooms, it's kind of a loose term, but heirloom means an older variety that was introduced before hybrids. And in a second, we'll talk about what a hybrid is. But hybrid garden seeds started in around somewhere after World War II. Somewhere between 1945 and about 1960. So if a variety is called an heirloom, it's somewhere before about 1945 to 1960. So those are older varieties, and sometimes it's fun to try something like that, an older type. Some people feel, for example, that tomatoes, an heirloom variety, might have a flavor that others don't. So, it's kind of personal preference. Some flowers, it's fun to grow some of the varieties that maybe your grandparents or great-grandparents did.
So with a name like heirloom, as using that as kind of like an adjective, I know like I think I remember hearing like in the world of antiques, an antique has to be at least 100 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
Heirloom, that's a little bit more. It's a little bit more loose.
Vintage.
Vintage. Maybe it's vintage. It has to be 100 years old. But heirloom is not necessarily. It has to be.
So there's not a
particular
hard and
year.
fast. Yeah, it doesn't have to be older than like 100 years or something. But it's generally before the dawn of hybrid type things. Okay, so a hybrid, what is that? A hybrid is when plant breeders take two parents that they want to combine the best characteristics of both into one, and so they cross-pollinate the flowers, and the resulting seed is called a hybrid. And oftentimes hybrids will have maybe better vigor. In fact, that's a term, hybrid vigor, and maybe disease resistance. So they've carefully selected the two parents to combine the best things. Maybe it's a new color. Most of our apples are hybrids, crosses between two things. Maybe it's earliness, maybe it's hardiness. So they can get the best of two things into one seed. Now, hybrids can be in nature too. So, a hybrid isn't some, science fiction type thing. A hybrid can occur in nature if a bee travels between two different plants, two different varieties, and the resulting seed is a hybrid too. So bees can do that work too, but the scientists carefully select the parents that they want to combine.
Is that related to similar to the term genetically modified.
No.
And because genetically modified has a different connotation. I know it's kind of is frowned upon by some circles.
That can be very debatable, controversial.
Right.
But hybrids, like I say, a hybrid can occur in nature. So a hybrid's more of a natural type thing. And whereas genetically modified, you're actually going into the genes and doing, some things such as that probably don't occur in nature. I'm not a geneticist.
Right.
But so anyway, hybrids can have advantages. If in the seed catalog, a non-hybrid might be called an heirloom, but it might also be called open-pollinated. Yeah, so you see that term a lot in a seed catalog too. Now, from a hybrid, if you collected the seed from that, what grows out of a hybrid, does not usually come true. So if on a squash, if it was a hybrid squash, and so you plant that seed, it bears fruit, and then if you were to scrape the seed out of that squash fruit, it likely would not come back what you planted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so hybrids need to be carefully created like that from controlled crosses, but the offspring of that could be more variable.
Okay.
Now, open-pollinated, doesn't have some of the characteristics maybe of a hybrid, but open-pollinated does tend to come true from seed. So you could, if you had an open-pollinated squash, chances are if you collected seed from those fruit, it would come true again. It would give you the same type of fruit that you planted. Okay. And so it's interesting. But in fact, most of the seed catalogs declare, or many declare, that they don't sell genetically modified seed.
Okay.
Because a lot of people just don't prefer to even get into that discussion.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about a little bit more about what to look for in a seed catalog after we take this quick little break.
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.
Okay, so we're back and we're talking seed catalogs. We've got a table full of catalogs in front of us. And we talked a little bit about that not all catalogs have all the same things. But when looking through a catalog, what are some of the things that you look for? Are there certain terms that you look for, certain phrases? Are there certain, do you look for number of seeds in a packet? What are the things that you look for to make a decision about what you're going to buy?
Yeah, what I look for is dependent on what it is I'm buying. Okay, for example, if I'm looking for perennial flowers, and many of these seed catalogs, in addition to seeds, they also sell plants, perennial flowers, sometimes trees and shrubs. So if I'm looking for a perennial flower, for example, I look for the hardiness zone to make sure it's in our zones 3 and 4, to make sure it's going to be winter hardy, because many of the catalogs, Burpee, for example, is a national catalog, so they do handle some perennial flowers that aren't for our zone. So if it's a perennial flower, the first thing I look for is the hardiness zone, and then after that, I look for the characteristics I'm looking for. Okay, if it's an annual flower, I'm less concerned because a wave petunia in Georgia is probably going to do, they do just fine here too. And so annual flowers, I'm not really concerned where geographically they're coming from. With annual flowers, I'm more concerned about what is the height of it, what is the spread of it, is it going to fit into my container, is it called a container annual, something that's going to stay neat in a pot or a hang basket. And so annual flowers, I'm really not concerned about hardiness zones or anything because they're just the one season anyway. Yep. And so I don't really care where I'm ordering those from. Now, vegetables, I do look carefully because the growing seasons, for example, in Georgia, is much different than North Dakota, Minnesota, South Dakota. And so for certain types of vegetables, I look very closely at the days to maturity.
Okay.
For example, tomatoes.
Term that's always used.
That a person sees, days to maturity. And For example, tomatoes. If you want a main season tomatoes, it should list the days to maturity at around 70 to 78 days. 70 to 78 days. Those will ripen out good. And that's from the time that you set that tomato plant out, transplant it out into the garden.
Okay. It's not from
not
seed.
from seed.
Yeah.
Nope, exactly. So that's when you transplant them out. And of course, that's just a kind of an estimate. You can't set your calendar and say in 70 days I'm going to have a tomato. Much depends on the weather, etc. But it does allow you to categorize the varieties. So when I look at that tomato seed catalog, and behind each variety they do say how many days. So if I wanted some really early tomatoes, I'd maybe look at some that were maybe 50 to 65 days. That'll give you some good early. But then I want plenty of tomatoes that are going to be good main season for canning. So then I look for 70 to 75, 78 days. If a tomato says it's 80 to 100 days, those are going to be late.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm asked by people, the tomatoes just didn't ripen good this year, but then we find out that it was a variety that took 100 days to ripen. So those aren't going to be ripe until maybe September or so.
Yeah, and then when you consider that normally we do most of our planting on Memorial Day.
Yeah.
Right?
Somewhere between the 20th to the 30th of May.
Yeah, and then so you basically, it just means that you want to get it in there. You want to start pulling tomatoes probably by the end of August.
Yep,
exactly. Because you get around too deep into September, you don't know what the weather's going to be like.
Yep, exactly. So I watch the days to maturity, and even things such as cabbage. If you want some early cabbage, late cabbage, you look at those days. It's less important if you're doing things like radishes, lettuce.
Those are quick.
Those are quick,
right?
But tomatoes, pepper, eggplant, melons, very important for muskmelon, watermelon. Choose those that are maybe like 70 to 80
Squash.
days. Yep, we don't want a watermelon that's going, the big Congo type that are going to take 110 days. Although that's kind of fun to try.
Right.
But
pumpkins, maybe? Yeah.
Yeah. And so I watch on certain vegetables, I watch how many days. Also on sweet corn.
Okay.
It's fun to have an early sweet corn.
Yep.
So you can start eating quicker. But then it's also nice to have some ripening over an extended period. So I choose an early sweet corn based on the days that it says, and a mid and a late.
On the days to maturity, do they also list that on most plant tags? Like if you were to go to a garden center and buy a tomato, would they?
Yes.
They would. Okay.
Good point. The plant tags will almost always indicate the days.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, you can't set your calendar by it, but it gives you the gauge, to go by.
But so
early
maybe,
versus late.
Yeah, so maybe if you were going to do from seed, it allows you maybe a little bit more flexibility that if you were going to start growing those indoors or under grow lights, or if you had a greenhouse or something like that, maybe you could actually get those a little further along than you could tomatoes that you're going to buy in mid-May, right?
Yep, you sure could.
So it allows seeds. There is a benefit to doing seeds if you can have that, right?
Yep, exactly. And so other things that I look for in addition to the days and the hardiness zone, if it's a perennial, I carefully look at the flowers that I want to order for. I mentioned the height and the spread, but also something that's going to give me lots of good bloom and the color that I want. Sometimes it's fun. I enjoy varying our flower beds a little by color, and I kind of look at what colors might kind of blend together a little bit so that people don't look at our flower beds and say, gosh, I wonder why Kinsler's planted that combination. So we do try to do a little bit of planning. So those, I guess, are the main things that I look for in the catalogs.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of a fun thing. What other things in the catalogs, when you've got them all kind of spread out, or do you have an approach to? I know you said that you, depending on what you're looking for, but do you have an approach? Do you try to find your vegetables first? Do you try to get those down first, or do you try to find your flowers first? Do you have an approach to how you attack the catalog?
I do.
The ordering.
I do. When the seed catalog arrives in the mail. Oh, and I should mention. Most of these seed catalogs have a good online, they have the actual catalog online. So when you look up these different companies, and they're easy to search, when you look them up, they usually have a tab there to request a catalog. or you can do it online. But when the catalog arrives in the mailbox, what I do is, because I'm so excited about it, I usually sit down with a cup of coffee and I just look through. The first thing that I usually look through is, and it's usually in the beginning of the catalog, is what's new.
Okay.
I love the new varieties. Now, one thing I have learned, though, is that when they say new, it might be new to them. It may be a new offering to that company, right?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily brand new, hot off the market, but it might be new to them. So I've noticed that. But still, I like seeing, and some of the things are brand new. And so that's what I do. I first look at what's new. And then, to be honest, I just enjoy thumbing through it and kind of getting that feel that spring is coming. And then after that introductory kind of enjoyment, at some point, maybe not in the first setting, but then I sit down and I make sure that I order fairly early, because some of these things, I've run into this case where I think, well, gosh, I don't need to start tomato seeds until April 1st. I'm just going to put it off a little. And then sometimes the varieties will be sold out.
I was going to say, when do you try to order by?
I do try to order either in January, by the end of January, or early February.
Okay.
It was interesting. During the pandemic, of course, when we had that big, there was just a flood of gardeners ordering seeds. And it was surprising. The seed company that I'd ordered from for years, Twilly Seed for vegetables, they indicated to me, they said, well, you should have ordered a lot earlier. They said there's been a run on seed. You should have ordered in November. And, the seed, I don't think I got the seed catalog yet. Well, anyway, my point being, I try to order early so I get the varieties that I want. Because you're not going to get any fresher seed by waiting. Those seeds were already picked and harvested in the fall. So we can order the seeds early, and then what I do is put them in a jar. The seed packets are sealed, unopened, so I probably wouldn't need to put them in a jar. But I put them in a covered container and then put them in the refrigerator. Then they're going to keep as well for me as they would the seed company.
Why a refrigerator? Because if we were to go in a garden center, they just have the seed packets out on the shelf, just in any other room.
That's true. And that's okay for the limited months that they're going to be on that seed rack. But just because seeds keep better cool and dry, I just, out of habit, always put them in the refrigerator. If you were to keep them at room temperature for an extended length, the germination would be diminished.
Okay.
And so that's just for safety, I always tuck them in. And I'm quite sure that the seed companies, the wholesale seed companies, I'm sure they're probably keeping theirs under refrigeration until they're shipped to you.
So when you order seeds, do the seeds packets, are they kind of like, if you get a beverage, you get a 6-pack or you get a 12-pack or you get a 24-pack? Do seeds always come in the same amount, 6 seeds to a pack, 12 seeds to a pack, 24 to a pack, or are they varied?
They do vary. Usually with most of these seed companies, you have the option for example, the Twilly Seed Company actually sells some of those by seed count. Do you want 50 seeds, 100 seeds? For some varieties, the price break, you can get 500 seeds for just a fraction more of the cost than for 100 seeds. Other seed companies sell just by a packet, and you don't always know what the packet is, how many seeds in a packet, unless they kind of say that. And so sometimes it's not always clear, but many of the seed companies, though, do indicate how many seeds you're actually getting. For example, wave petunias, you don't get many seeds in a packet. Some of the packets maybe only have 10 seeds. But if I'm doing petunias in hanging baskets, and if I've got 10 seeds, you probably aren't going to get all 10 to grow. But if I could get 8 to grow, I maybe don't need more than that. And so sometimes it might be alarming as, oh my gosh, I'm only getting 10 or 20 seeds. That might be all you need.
Well, so let's talk about something like a petunia. When you buy like a cell pack, right? If you get a cell pack and there's 4 per, how many seeds roughly would be in each cell of those, do you think?
One.
Okay.
Yep, one. Most, and of course, during our greenhouse years, we would plant seed, when we would sell 6-packs, 4-packs of plants, okay? We'd seed the seeds in seed trays. They'd come up, and then we would transplant those seedlings into the packs of 4, packs of 6, 12. And so with each one, we would put one seedling in each. There were certain things where you'd put multiples in because they just kind of spread out. For example, alyssum. Okay. Alyssum kind of grows in clumps and spreads outward, so those always got about 3 little seedlings a clump. Moss roses were always done in a little clump. But like petunias and all those singles are, in fact, tomatoes, it's preferred that each one only has a single plant so that they don't outcompete each other.
And I suppose this comes into planning then, like when you're talking about petunias, or like especially if you're looking at the Vista petunias or the ones that are real spreaders, that really you don't need as many seeds,
exactly.
So have an idea of what you want out of it.
Yeah, so you mentioned the Vista, like the Vista bubblegum petunia. Yeah. Wow, that is just amazing.
Yeah.
And they will get so much good growth. So I don't know, in a hanging basket, 3 plants maybe
tops,
only one.
Yeah. One or two.
One or two would probably do it as well. Now you bring up a good point, John, on like in the vegetable garden. How many seeds, how big of a packet of seed do you need to plant in that row? Some of the seed catalogs will indicate how many feet of row their pack will plant. And some of the seed catalogs are just a wealth of information like that. For example, I think Johnny's seed catalog probably tells you exactly how many feet of row that pack will plant. And I notice even on the seed racks that you buy, seed racks in stores, garden center stores, usually it'll indicate on the back, this pack plants how many feet of row. So that's helpful too. Hey, by the way, that brings up the good point too, John. Okay, why order from these seed catalogs? Why not just shop at the seed rack in the garden center or the hardware store? I do both. I buy some things off those seed racks, but those seed racks can't handle everything.
Right.
These seed catalogs have thousands of varieties each.
Well, you're talking about this Totally Tomatoes one that'll have thousands of varieties of tomatoes alone.
And for example, I want big beef tomato and I want celebrity tomato. And those two I usually do not see on seed racks.
Yeah.
And so there are good reasons for shopping seed catalogs. And because a seed rack just can't handle all the different varieties. And so that was a little bit of a sidetrack. I don't know if I answered your question, John.
Well, that's okay. Let's take a quick little break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about seeds.
When you can't make it to City Hall or school board meetings, local journalists from Inforum.com will be there to report the facts and get your questions answered. Local news works for you. Stay up to date at Inforum.com.
Okay, we're back, and this week we're talking about seed and seed catalogs, which are out. They're available now. You can, like Don, you said that you can go online to a seed retailer. You can order a catalog if you want the physical hard copy, or you can just look online. I wanted to talk a little bit about because seeds will come in a variety of number of seeds per packet. You can, and you said, you can order for a fraction more, you can order multiple more. For people that are planning, what's a good success rate for seeds? If let's say you've got 10 per packet, I know it depends, per the variety maybe, but what rate should you expect to be success with?
Yeah, and the seed packets have to indicate on that packet what their germination percent is, but it doesn't tell that in the seed catalog normally.
So germination percent is what you're looking for.
Yeah, so the germination percentage is the percent of when they've tested that seed, the percent of live seed that's going to sprout for you. And in most cases, it's around 80%.
Okay.
So if you're ordering large quantities of seed, then if you can get 80%, that's good. But it's interesting if you're ordering some high-priced seeds where there's not many seed. For example, wave petunias. Wave petunias are expensive.
Okay,
the seed.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Let's get back to that.
Yeah.
We'll talk
so
about
if
price.
I was going to order,
let's talk about success
and
rates.
sometimes the wave petunias are sometimes sold by 20 seeds or 50 seeds. And so a person would probably figure that you're only going to get about 80% of that to grow. So then you kind of do a little bit of calculating as to how many seeds you need and kind of go from there. So yeah, not every seed is going to sprout.
Okay.
But usually you get a pretty good rate of return on those. Now, okay, well, another thing that's really interesting is for the vegetable garden, when you're ordering a packet of seed, radish seed or lettuce seed or something like that, you're going to get at least 80% probably seed, seedlings that sprout. But, it's interesting. Okay, there's kind of a Murphy's rule with vegetable seeding. Okay, so if we're seeding radishes, if you seed them too thick, they're going to outcompete and they aren't going to form good. So if you seed them thick, you've got to thin them out. So sometimes I've thought, okay, well, I'm going to space them out so I don't have to thin them out. But then sometimes that'll be the case where then the germination is weak and they're too far apart. So, so do you seed them thick and then try to thin them out, or do you space them out a little but then risk if not many come up? And sometimes it's not always the seed that's the fault. It might be the germination conditions of your soil. So it's not always the seed to blame either. So it's always interesting, how thickly you should seed your vegetable seed as well. But it's especially probably that seed quantity or count pertains more to flower seed that you're ordering.
Okay. Like when you're talking about like if you're ordering 100 seeds, if the packet comes in 100 seeds and maybe you don't need that many, but let's say you want half of them, you can share them. Certainly, you could be a very good friend and share, or you and a friend could organize, and you could say, I'm going to get this, and I will give you some of this. If you give me some of this, it's a great way to do it.
Exactly, because sometimes there aren't small quantities. You might have to order a larger quantity. Garden clubs are great for this. Join a garden club and share in there.
But what about we talked a little bit about storing from
what if you don't have a friend to share?
Yeah, what if you don't have
that doesn't want some of the things I do?
You talked about that. You put yours in a glass jar. Will that last over?
They'll easily. Almost all seeds will last at least a year.
Okay.
Flower seeds last very well. Tomato seeds, pepper seeds, lettuce seed, radish seed. The seeds that have the least lifespan are the larger seeds, like sweet corn, squash, pumpkins. They should still germinate a year later if stored in the refrigerator and in a tightly closed container.
Okay.
The two things that threaten the germination ability of seed, and that is high temperatures and high humidity.
Okay.
So the wrong place for me to put my seed is out in the garage during the summertime,
right?
Where it's going to be hot and humid. And so as soon as you're done with your seeds, tuck them in the refrigerator. One thing that works really well, these little desiccant packages that seem to, every time I order something online and it comes in a box.
Oh, yeah.
Many things have this little desiccant package in that I suppose it's to keep wires and different things dry. Or
Yep.
Those little desiccant packages work well to slip inside that jar of seeds. That'll help keep it dry as well. So I've learned to hang on to those little packages instead of throwing them out. So include it in your seed container.
A lot of times, like if you get a coat, it'll be in the pocket or something like that.
It seems like they're all over now.
Yeah. That's a good.
With the things that get shipped in.
That's a good use for that. So let's talk a little bit about the price of seeds. And again, I'm sure this varies quite a bit. But you said that wave petunias are particularly expensive as far as seed goes. So if you were to buy a packet of, let's say, 20 seeds for wave petunia, how much roughly do you think you would expect to pay?
Well, let's see. From the seed company that I buy the Twilly seed, I believe for 50 seeds is about $20 with shipping.
Okay.
So what does that amount?
But
to 50 seeds, what is that, about 40 cents a seed?
Yeah. Yeah.
or so. So if I was doing a 6-pack, 4 times 6, about $2.40. But I also have some soil and things in.
Yep.
So do you save a whole lot of money?
Yeah.
Well, not always, but I get the varieties I want. Right. There may be varieties, and I shop at garden centers. I don't start my own things necessarily to save money. I do a lot of shopping at garden centers. But sometimes there's something unique that I want. Garden centers can't sell everything to everybody.
Yeah.
I've got some things that are just peculiar to Don Kinsler, and I can't expect the garden centers to cater to all my whims. And so there are some things I start just because, I want something that I want, and the garden centers can't be expected to handle everything. So I'm not always saving money. Sometimes I am. For me, it's a hobby. I love starting seeds. I've got a lot of time invested. For example, nonstop begonias.
Okay.
I start those in February to get a plant big enough by May.
Okay.
So I've got a lot of time invested in those. So time is money. So am I saving a whole lot? Well, if you figured all the time I put into it, it would be better money-wise for me just to buy those.
Yeah.
But it's a hobby for me. I enjoy watching those grow. And so you have to factor some of that in too. So am I saving money with some of the things I do? Probably not. But it's, And it's giving me a really good hobby and pastime and makes the winter go really nice.
Talking about the pros and cons versus, buying seeds versus buying plants from a good garden center. As somebody who's newer to a house, I've been in our house for 6 years. Sometimes people just don't have the space. If you live in an apartment, right, you may not have the space to grow seeds, and you may not have the kind of the space and also the access to, a good light situation.
Well, that's a very good point. Because, for example, if you're going to raise some of your own flower plants, they need to be started, like my begonias in February. Yeah. Marigolds, they could be started middle of March or so. But I have an unfinished basement. It doesn't matter if I water the plants, I get dirt on the floor, it's all fine. Mary's a patient wife. She doesn't mind if I've got dirt here and there. But not everyone with a finished basement, wouldn't be their thing.
Right.
And so again, it's a hobby too. But the seed catalogs have so many nice vegetable varieties, and so for anybody growing vegetables or even seeding them directly out into the garden, the seed catalogs have so many nice vegetables. So it's interesting when you look at the advantages, disadvantages of ordering seed, starting your own plants. It's kind of what does work for you.
Are there some things that that you could get the seed, but that you also know that you can get them in a garden center, so you're just going to get them in the garden center?
Definitely.
Just for ease or for what? And what are those ththings? Just to give us an idea.
Definitely. Cucumbers.
Oh, really? You'll just buy the cucumber plant?
In the past, we've planted, a dozen hills of cucumbers, and we've got so many bushels of cucumbers we don't know what to do with them all.
Okay.
So instead, Mary and I only need about 2 plants of cucumbers. So instead of buying seed, we go to the garden center and buy a pre-started cucumber plant. It doesn't pay for me to start 2 cucumber plants.
So maybe
myself.
Some of those things that are big producers.
Yeah, exactly. And so let's see. Impatiens, some of the impatiens for hanging baskets. We maybe only need a 6-pack, and I'm not going to buy seed, go through the whole process just for 6. So for things like that, if you only want a little small quantity, then it probably doesn't pay to order seed. It's kind of interesting. You have to kind of work with it to see what's for your own situation.
Are there things that for matter of ease that are just because if you have this investment of time and space and resources to do a seed, are there some things that you're just like, it's just easier just to buy it as a plant in the garden center and plop it in the ground or plop it in? Are there
Definitely,
things that come to mind?
There
for that?
are some, yes, Lisianthus. Lisianthus is an annual. It's beautiful. It's very finicky to start the seed.
Okay.
The seedlings come up weak, and I've determined that I'm going to buy Lysianthus from the garden centers because it's beautiful. In May they've got nice plants, and so I'm not going to go through all it takes to get those to grow. And so it's fun. The thing that I enjoy is it's not an either or. Some things I order from the seed catalogs. I enjoy it. Good experience. I enjoy growing things. Others, it's just as good to go to the garden center and get the plants there. And so you can have it all.
Yeah.
You can have your cake and eat it too.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
See, I can order from seed catalogs, enjoy that, start some things. I can go to the garden centers. And so you kind of do what fits your own situation.
Well, just kind of in closing, here we are in the new year. Do you have any gardening New Year's resolutions?
Always. And it's the ongoing resolution, and that is each year I'm going to keep up with the weeds better than I did the year before. Because, I'm on such a mission, because if you can prevent weeds from going to seed, it eventually does lighten the burden. Yep. You don't have that seed bank coming up all the time and weed seeds blowing around, things like that. So I'm on a mission, and I have got to say I'm making headway.
Good.
Each year it seems the amount of weeds are a little less. I don't think they'll ever disappear.
No.
So that's my ongoing resolution, is to stay ahead of those.
Mine is to keep better track of what I planted, when I planted, and how it looks, so that I can have pictures, so that I can, when it comes to planting the garden, to say, this is what we did last year. What do we like? What should we keep? And what should we do differently? And that is...
well, I'm always sure I'm going to remember.
I always think it will.
And then the next year comes along, and then I'm asking Mary, what was that? What was that petunia that performed so well?
Yeah, being better organized on that end is a big thing for me that I've got to do. So
yeah, great idea. And I want to try to put in our perennial flower beds, and I don't know how I'm going to accomplish this yet, but I want to put some structure in them. But by structure, I mean some features, a water feature, some fountains, some statuary, something like to kind of tie the perennial flower beds together. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. Maybe it's some little sections of lattice with some vines on, but I want to add some interesting kind of structure. But I kind of know the effect I'd like, but I don't know how to accomplish it yet. I got to figure that out.
Got a couple months left.
All of this, isn't it fun this time of year to be thinking about all that?
It is, because it's just generally here we are, because we don't have to go do it tomorrow or today because we can't get out into the yards quite yet. So it's just everything it's a blank slate. It's potential. Everything is the potential for greatness is at its peak right now, where we are bound and determined to have the best garden we've ever had. Things will happen throughout the year that will delay, some things won't work. But right now we can visualize this perfect garden. I shouldn't say perfect, because you shouldn't strive for perfection. You just strive for good and what works and what likes. And we've got
I love
great
the
anticipation.
Leisure. Yeah, and I love the leisure. This is a little more leisurely.
Yes.
I mean, when spring hits, wow, sometimes when it hits, it's go. I mean, that's fun, that's beautiful, but oftentimes there's lawns to mow, there's weeds to start getting on top of, planting, cutting some things back, etc. So it's kind of fun this time of year. It's a little more leisurely to look and plan, and so I like to take advantage of this time that's a little more leisurely.
Well, I like how you started off this conversation, which was saying that you get these in the mail, you get these wonderful seed catalogs that we're looking at, you get these in the mail, and you sit down with a cup of coffee. And that, I think, is a great way of, you're relaxed, you're enjoying something in your hand. You've got, at the other hand, you're paging through. You're enjoying something now. You're in the present, and you're looking for something that you're going to enjoy in the future. I think that's just a wonderful way of starting it off, the whole process.
Yeah, I do too. In fact, as we're talking about this, I can't wait to get home at the end of the day, because I've got, I think the Burpee seed catalog I haven't gone through yet. That just came. So yeah.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to hearing about once you get your seeds in, and then also what your plans will be. And then, of course, once things get in the ground, we'll check back and we'll talk about, maybe we should do a show maybe midsummer about how your seeds have been done.
Yeah.
And maybe even we'll do a check-in how your seeds are growing before you put them in the ground, how they're growing once they're in the ground, and then let's at the end of the season, let's talk about what things worked and what didn't.
Yeah, sounds good. I'd invite everyone down into our basement once we get things going under lights. Yeah. Well, great.
We'll have pictures of some of these catalogs that we'll post on our Instagram account. And so if people have questions about seeds or about anything for you, Don, what's the best way to reach you?
Best way is to email me, donald.kinsler, KINZLER, at ndsu.edu. And I love, like I'll say, we're all in this together, as I always say. And I love the emails. I recently got a picture because I had written something about tamarack trees, another name for larch, and somebody sent me a photo that they had taken in the fall. So it's so fun. We're all in this together. We've got an empty chair at the table, like I always say, and that's for you, the listener. You're right here with us.
Well, and let's have listeners, if you have a seed packet that you've had for a while, or if you've got heirloom seeds that you've had for a while, or if you've got a picture of your favorite catalog, send those along, and we'll post those, and that'll be fun for everybody to see. We'll share this information with everybody.
Good idea. Hey, I got to add this one last thing because I love this. A reader or a listener. This was a year ago. They sent me some seed from celosia that they had gotten from Monticello. These were celosia.
Monticello, Minnesota?
No, I'm sorry. Thomas Jefferson's
Monticello. Okay.
Yeah. He loved gardening. He planted these celosia coxcomb, a beautiful maroon color.
They get really vibrant, right? Vibrant reds.
Exactly. And so these were seeds from the seeds that he planted.
Oh.
And open-pollinated, so they come true.
Okay.
Not a hybrid. And so anyway, this person had gotten some seeds in Monticello they sent me. So now each year I plant those. So a good example of how we're all in this together.
That is really fun.
That is fun.
Yeah, so anybody, if you've got pictures of
I'm
plants,
afraid I don't have enough to share seeds with everybody, but
that's okay. But if also people have pictures of plants that they've planted from seeds that they want to share those, that'd be great. Send those along to Don.
Super.
All right. Well, Don, we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, also, and thanks very much, everyone, for listening. Have a good week.